In this episode, we're going to treat backups the way attackers treat them, as one of the most valuable things in the environment. Backups are supposed to be your second chance after a mistake, failure, or attack, but they can also become the biggest single prize if they are left unprotected. A backup repository often holds complete copies of critical systems and sensitive data, which means one weak spot can expose far more than a single hacked device ever could. When people assume backups are safe by default, they usually mean they have copies somewhere, not that those copies are well defended. The goal here is to build a clear mental model for protecting backups with the same seriousness you would protect production systems, using access controls, encryption, and isolation that actually hold up under pressure. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A helpful starting point is to understand why backup systems are frequently targeted early in real attacks. If an attacker can delete backups, they remove your ability to roll back to a clean point in time. If they can encrypt backups, they can create a double problem. Your live systems are locked and your recovery path is locked too. If they can quietly alter backups, they can plant corrupted or infected versions of data that you restore later, turning recovery into a second compromise. Backups are also attractive for simple theft because they often contain the richest, most complete data sets an organization has. The more centralized and convenient backups become, the more tempting they become, which is why convenience has to be balanced with strong defensive controls. Many beginners picture backups as a passive pile of files, like boxes stacked in a closet, but modern backup systems are active platforms. They schedule jobs, manage versions, store metadata, enforce retention, and provide administrative interfaces for restoring data quickly. That means there is software, identity, networking, and management logic involved, not just storage space. Any place where humans sign in, permissions are assigned, or settings can be changed becomes a potential entry point. That also means backups can fail or be sabotaged in subtle ways that do not look dramatic at first. When you treat backups as a platform, you naturally start asking platform questions. Who can log in? What can they do? How is that activity tracked? And how do we prevent a compromise in one system from spreading into the backup system? Access control is the first protective layer, and it is easiest to understand as deciding who gets which keys and what doors those keys open. The most dangerous situation is when a broad set of administrators can both manage production systems and fully control backups using the same accounts. If an attacker steals one powerful credential, they can take down production and erase recovery at the same time. Strong access control reduces that blast radius by narrowing who can access backups and limiting what each role can do. It also means avoiding shared accounts, because shared accounts make it hard to prove who took an action. When every action is tied to a specific identity, you get accountability and better detection, which matters because backup attacks often happen quickly and quietly. A deeper access control idea is separating duties so that no single compromised identity can perform every destructive action end to end. For example, restoring data is not the same as deleting the history of backups, and those powers should not automatically travel together. Even within a small trusted group, it is safer to divide responsibilities so that large, irreversible actions require a second pair of eyes. This is where approvals matter, because some backup actions have consequences that are hard to undo. If a retention setting is changed or a repository is wiped, you might not notice until days later, at which point the safety net is already gone. A well-designed environment makes dangerous actions harder, slower, and more visible, while routine, low-risk actions remain smooth enough for operations. Authentication strength matters as much as permissions, because access control fails if attackers can impersonate the right user. Multi-factor authentication, MFA, reduces the risk that a stolen password alone is enough to gain access to backup administration. After the first mention, MFA should feel like a normal part of the story. If backups are the lifeboats, you do not let someone board the lifeboat captain's cabin with only a guessable secret. Strong authentication also includes practical decisions such as limiting where administrative access can come from and reducing the number of systems that can even reach backup management interfaces. You do not need to memorize specific products to understand the principle. The principle is that backup administration is a privileged capability, so the identity checks and access paths should be stricter than what a normal user experiences. Another access control habit is focusing on what is actually needed for day-to-day work, not what is convenient when setting things up. People often grant wide permissions because they want backups to just work and because troubleshooting is easier when everything is allowed. Over time, that creates an environment where many identities can change backup settings, and even well-meaning staff can accidentally do something risky. Least privilege is the idea of giving the minimum access necessary to perform a job, and backups are a place where least privilege has huge impact. If a restore operator only needs to read backup data and initiate restores, that should not come with the power to delete older backups. If a scheduler only needs to run jobs, that should not come with the power to disable logging. Encryption is the second protective layer, and its purpose is to protect confidentiality when storage is exposed or copied. Even if someone gains access to backup files, encryption should make those files unreadable without the correct keys. That matters because backups move around. They may be replicated to another location, stored in cloud infrastructure, written to removable media, or archived for long periods. Any of those steps can create accidental exposure, such as a misconfigured storage setting or a copied file that ends up somewhere it should not. Encryption reduces the harm of those mistakes. It also reduces the damage of some attacks where the attacker's goal is data theft rather than disruption. If you assume backups are full of sensitive content, encrypting them becomes less like an optional upgrade and more like a basic safety feature. It is important to understand that encryption only works as well as key management, because keys are what turn unreadable data back into readable data. Key management is not just where keys are stored, but who can access them, how access is logged, and what happens when keys need to change. Key Management Service, KMS, is one common approach for controlling keys centrally, and after the first mention, KMS should sound like the guarded key room rather than a magic spell. If the keys are stored in the same place as the encrypted backups and protected by the same accounts, then a single compromise can still reveal everything. A safer approach is to keep key access separate from backup access so that stealing one set of credentials does not automatically unlock the vault. Good key practices also include planning for key rotation and recovery, so encryption does not become a single point of failure for legitimate restores. Encryption also has to be thought about in two different states: when data is stored and when data is moving. If backup data travels over a network from a server to a repository, it should be protected during transfer as well as at rest. Otherwise, an attacker who can observe network traffic might capture sensitive content even if the stored backup files are encrypted later. Beginners sometimes assume encryption is a single on or off switch, but in reality, it is part of a chain of protection steps. The chain should be unbroken from the moment data leaves the system being backed up to the moment it is stored and later restored. When you keep that chain intact, you reduce the number of places where sensitive information can leak quietly. Isolation strategy is the third protective layer, and it is about preventing a compromise in production systems from easily reaching backups. If the same network pathways and credentials that run daily operations also have direct write access to backup storage, then malware can often spread or act on backups as part of the same attack. Isolation introduces barriers that slow attackers and prevent automated destruction. One form of isolation is network segmentation, which means backup systems live in a separated environment with tightly controlled traffic rules. Another form is limiting trust relationships, so that production identities do not automatically have authority in the backup domain. The big idea is that backups should not be as reachable as everyday systems, because reachability is exactly what attackers exploit. A particularly useful isolation concept is immutability, which means a backup cannot be modified or deleted for a defined retention period once it is written. Immutability is powerful because it protects against both attackers and accidents, and it does not rely on someone noticing a problem in time. If ransomware tries to encrypt backup files, an immutable design can block that modification. If an attacker tries to delete old backups to remove recovery points, immutability can prevent that deletion until the retention window ends. The exact mechanics differ across environments, but you can hold on to the mental model that immutability is like sealing a document in a tamper-resistant envelope for a set amount of time. You can still read it when authorized, but you cannot rewrite history on a whim. Another isolation approach is creating an air gap, which means keeping backups in a place that is not continuously connected to the systems being protected. Air gaps can be physical, like removable media that is not always plugged in, or logical, like a separate environment with no routine inbound connectivity from production. The practical value is that an attacker who spreads through connected systems cannot automatically spread into disconnected ones. Beginners sometimes imagine air gaps as old-fashioned, but the underlying idea remains relevant: reduce continuous exposure. A backup that is always reachable is always attackable. A backup that is only reachable through controlled, limited paths gives you a stronger chance that some recovery points survive even if the main environment is heavily compromised. Monitoring and audit evidence tie all three layers together, because you need to know whether protections are working and whether something suspicious is happening. Backup systems should generate logs that show administrative actions, changes to retention settings, deletion attempts, failed login attempts, and unusual spikes in activity. Those signals matter because backup attacks often start with small changes, like disabling jobs, changing retention so backups expire quickly, or attempting to remove immutability protections. If you can see those events and treat them as important, you increase your ability to respond before the safety net is cut. Monitoring is also valuable for catching non-malicious problems, such as backups that have silently stopped running or repositories that are filling up. The point is not to watch everything obsessively, but to ensure that dangerous actions and failures are visible and reviewable. It is also critical to verify that backups are actually recoverable, because protection without usability is a false sense of security. A backup can be perfectly encrypted and isolated and still fail to restore because it was incomplete, corrupted, or misconfigured. Verification includes restore tests and integrity checks that prove the data can be brought back in a usable form. This is where beginners often learn a tough lesson. A backup job that reports success is not the same as a successful restore. Real confidence comes from practiced recovery, documented results, and clear expectations about what can be restored and how long it will take. Verification also helps you discover hidden dependencies, like a system that relies on an identity service or a license server that must be available for recovery to truly work. Human behavior is the quiet factor that can weaken even the best technical design. Under pressure, people take shortcuts, and backup administration is often performed during emergencies when speed feels urgent. That is why clear approvals for dangerous actions, strong authentication, and separate privileges matter so much. These controls protect the organization not only from attackers, but also from panic-driven mistakes. Training and habit building help too, because when administrators understand the role backups play in survival, they are more likely to respect the controls instead of bypassing them. The safest backup environment is one where doing the right thing is the default, and doing the risky thing requires deliberate effort and visibility. That approach supports both security and reliability. To wrap up, protecting backups as high-value targets is about building defense in depth where access control, encryption, and isolation reinforce each other rather than acting alone. Access controls decide who can touch backups and prevent a single stolen credential from becoming a disaster. Encryption protects the contents so that exposure of storage does not automatically equal exposure of data, as long as keys are handled with care. Isolation strategy, including segmentation, immutability, and air gap thinking, reduces the chance that production compromise becomes backup compromise. Add monitoring and verification, and you gain both early warning and proof that recovery will work when you need it most. When these ideas are taken seriously, backups stay what they were meant to be: a reliable lifeline, not another easy win for an attacker.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.